What did the pandemic ruin more than we realize? This might just be local, but where I live, a ton of businesses closed. I mean, half of them were closed. Not just because of the shutdown, they were closed permanently. The health system is wrecked. Way too many nurses got burned out and left the profession. Independent smaller DIY music venues never really recovered. People's driving is so out of whack, my only concern is to make it home in one piece. I went to go get Taco Bell at 10 o'clock and it was closed. I'm sorry you had to go through that. We are in this together. Don't give up. Young people's desire to go into healthcare. We won't realize it for a generation or so, but healthcare in America was already chronically understaffed. The pandemic burning out medical professionals and discouraging young people from going into healthcare is going to have a negative effect on the quality of healthcare, not only in the United States, but other hard-hit countries, too. People seem so much crappier in large group public situations now. I don't know what it is, but etiquette in places like a movie theater used to be standard, but every experience I've had lately has been horrible. People talking, sitting there on their phones, and other just generally bad things. I've heard the same about concerts, but haven't been to as many myself. I've heard from others where people used to be polite, help each other up in pits and stuff and so on, they now just don't give a F. It's like people are just more rude now for some reason. I'm really interested to know if this is happening everywhere or if I just live in a rude place. My social/work life, after living like a hermit for 2 years and working from home, it's taking me a long time to go out like before. My husband just informed me I haven't left the house in 4 days. I had no idea. Any type of 24/7 business is just a memory. I can't trust the hours of any business on Google anymore. Places just close whenever the F now. The cost of living is pretty. Food prices just keep going up. We're buying less than ever, and more generic/less premium version of everything, and yet we're paying easily twice as much as our far more luxurious and full cart of groceries we were getting in 2010. Time perception, 2019 was 3, soon to be 4, years ago? My brain still thinks that 2019 was last year. I don't know if you've watched The Good Place, but it's like we've been stuck in the dot above the I and Jeremy Bearimy. Night shift people lives. Nothing is ever open late anymore. Essential versus non-essential employees, better known as those who had to show up physically in person, and those allowed to stay home. Biggest division in the workplace. Mentally it will never be the same in the workplace. Feels like it's a more to each their own sense of living. People don't appear to be as connected as before the pandemic. The pandemic brought me much closer to my wife and son. It also made me incredibly jaded, cynical and much less trusting of everyone outside of these walls. Used car market is completely, as are flight prices. My sense of purpose or meaning. I haven't felt this nihilistic since I was a brooding teenage girl. 20 years later and now it's actually more of an existential hell. This is in relation to actual virus plus politics plus societal response. People are just mean. Most people have careers and work at companies that if either disappeared tomorrow, the only suffering would be from the employees without salaries anymore. As a teacher, I can say that it's definitely affected kids in a way people don't realize. Kids who had their first year of school, or even second, during the pandemic act quite different than kids who had a normal introduction to school. Many of them seem to have fewer social skills and higher anxiety than kids from previous years. I'm in my 40s, but the pandemic really cut the list of friends I socialized with in half. We got out of the habit of seeing one another, and now that things are back to normal, we just made a habit out of not having dinner dates and stuff like that. When I realized this was happening, it made me look back and realize that I was the one who used to plan things and reach out. I made the conscious decision to stop being the one who always reached out, called and texted, and I now see that I'm only in touch with half the people that I used to be. Price of eating out. Fast food is now almost the same price as a cheap sit-down restaurant pre-COVID. No school on snow days. It ruined me on traffic. For one glorious year, as an essential worker I had the roads almost entirely to myself. It was beautiful. The lockdowns happened during my last semester of university. I've never had an in-person job, only work from home, which I realize is a blessing but also makes it feel like it's not real. I have no work friends, have never met my supervisor in person. I do all my work from my desk in my room. It feels like pretend. My perception on money. I worked so hard to pay off debt, save up for a new house, get promotions. Now with the rise of housing costs and inflation I feel like money is literally such a made-up thing and I have no control over anything even with all the right decisions. I'm not sure if anyone else feels the same way, but my perception of time hasn't really returned back to normal since then. We were never in this together. I'm in healthcare. We were heroes when needed, but when we aren't we are flexed off the schedule without pay. I'm sure the office folks that aren't on the floor providing the actual care get paid though. I no longer recommend going into healthcare for anybody. I'd give it's like this everywhere, but certainly where I live a lot of the stores and restaurants still have hours. They close a lot earlier than they used to before the pandemic, and there's no sign of them ever returning to their normal hours of operation, which really sucks for people like me whose schedules only allow for late night shopping trips. Another thing I've noticed with certain restaurants is their quality of food and taste have suffered dramatically. Some of my favorite places to eat aren't nearly as good as they used to be. My waistline, and my mental well-being. It's my own fault, but I was about 6 months sober and working out daily before COVID. A few days later, half my department and my co-manager are laid off. I'm suddenly working 14-hour days in extremely stressful conditions. Walking my dog and working out took a backseat to a shot or two of Jack to calm my nerves and whatever comfort food I could get from Grubhub. Life is better now, but I haven't quite kicked all the bad habits I gained from those days. Stress affects me differently, and I'm a lot more sensitive to it than I used to be. Children's education, mental health, coping skills, and socialization. My wife is an elementary educator, and it's shocking how far kids regressed during the pandemic. By almost every measure, this generation of kids is in big trouble. I'm optimistic that the trend will right itself over time, but it's really sad to see. Increased polarization of people politically, socially, economically. People chain. Just-in-time ordering was a bad idea to begin with, but trying to adapt to the new normal when you are used to full shelves to choose from is almost worse. Grocery shopping at 2 a.m. was the best thing ever. Now I have to shop with the rest of you hooligans and it sucks. Modern dating. Can confirm dating post-pandemic is an absolute nightmare. I'm totally dying alone. Sobriety. I feel like everyone is more bitter now. Like we all saw through the sham of society. Time feels different now. Things just feel off compared to pre-2020. Everything just feels off, people are rude, no parties or overnight hangouts. Most people nowadays keep themselves busy on their phones and TikTok. My mental health also took a hit. The time before 2020 feels like a colorful fantasy while the present one feels like a dystopian world. Niche retail. There was this cool place that sold vintage Chanel, Hermes, 70s pieces. They needed the exploratory foot traffic to survive. People talk about test scores in core subjects, but an even bigger impact are areas that couldn't be done online. Kids at the age where you start an instrument, theater kids, visual arts, and sports all suffered from kids at a certain age either losing interest or not getting proper fundamentals. The 8th grade band shouldn't sound like the 6th grade band at the year-end concert. We lost a Halloween that was on a Friday with a blue moon. We ain't getting that back ever. Retail therapy at the local mall. Family relations. Vaxxed versus anti-vax, mask versus no mask, COVID deniers versus lockdown advocates. Fractured a lot of my family and many others. When you combine social media with a global pandemic, it forced all of us to realize people don't suffer equally. In the age before social media, we could rely on tradition or culture to justify sacrificing to come together. Nowadays we must be guarded to not be exploited. My ability to tolerate people and their trust. I don't trust anyone anymore. I learned that people are even dumber than my cynical brain ever imagined. For people who worked from home and flourished, coming back to the office for reasons essentially killed your respect for your boss and company culture in general. If I was producing just as well in PJs, why do I need to get dressed in a button-up, drive 40 minutes to do the same? My willingness to waste my life at an office when I can do the work just as well from home. Children's education, attitude, and manners. As a teacher, there is definitely a noticeable difference after COVID in these things. The attitudes and blatant disrespect is unbelievable. I don't take any of it personally, so it doesn't wear on me so much, but I can absolutely see why some teachers are burnt out because of it. Food delivery. Fees on fees, and the menu prices are more expensive in the apps. Yes, it's a convenience and you are paying for it, but damn, it's expensive. Then you play the tipping roulette game. Leave a good tip and your order still might be late, wrong, missing items, etc. Want a tip after you get your food, so you don't leave a tip beforehand? You ain't getting your food. The sense of security. I never know what's around the corner anymore. It's terrifying. Gentleness, giving one another grace. I worry that we're developing a toughness about the general state of things that is similar to the colder attitudes of older generations that went through hardship. I feel like Gen Z are coming off as far harsher and less easygoing than millennials, which feels like a step backward, given millennials had to fight for the right to be softer and more vulnerable than their predecessors. Hey, thanks for subscribing and liking. It really means a lot to me. While you are here, feel free to hop on over to the last video. See you there. Ronnie.